Hello and welcome back to Like Maria. Today we're going to look at another poem of the decade. This time we're going to look at Ciaran O'Driscoll's poem, Please Hold. I'm going to look at an essay question to do with this poem, the sort of thing that will come up on your exam paper. But before that, I just want to tell you what O'Driscoll says about his own poem. He talks about it as expressing, and this is a direct quote, modern anxiety and edginess. He talks about this sort of situation being an absolute nightmare, and he says that it's based on his experience of being in this context on a telephone call. So do bear that in mind as we're going through this essay title. So I'm going to answer the question, explore the way the poet presents the experience of frustration in this poem. Now in the exam you'd compare it with another poem, but for today I'm just sticking with Please Hold. I'm going to look at the structure of the poem, ideas of illusion and paradox in the poem, the lack of options presented to the voice in the poem, and I'm going to say a little bit about the voice of the narrator. So first of all, the structure of the poem. As you go through the poem, look carefully at what the lines concern. It's based on a phone call, and therefore, in terms of structure, the speaker is forced to respond to the robot. So in some ways, we might say that the robotic voice here determines the structure of the poem. And this, of course, brings frustration because it's not the speaker that's in control, but the robotic voice. So that partly causes frustration. The voice directs the poem. If we look at the first 33 lines, these are interaction with the robot and the wife repeating, "This is the future." And at the end of that, we hear that he's been cut off. So there's this idea of being cut off. The next 16 lines are more of a commentary where the robot is quoted and the frustration builds. And we get that very frustrated quote, "Eine fucking kleine Knack music." And that is a kind of 16 lines altogether. And then we move to the very end of the poem with the 3-line end, which is the development of the idea and a kind of plea from the title of the poem, Please Hold. So the structure does vary from section to section of the poem. So it's really important that you look at that and see how frustration moves on from being a controlled thing in the present tense to something that's reflected on, to something that is then looking towards the future, and that plea for please. This is really a stressful situation at the end there. So the second thing I want to talk about today is the ideas of illusion and paradox that appear in this poem. There are many things in this poem that don't fit together well, that are put together. So starting with just that line, "This is the future." Now, describing something now and saying it's the future is clearly a kind of paradoxical statement. So straight away we've got this idea of something in the future is actually happening now, and that's something that can't really happen. So that sets us up to think about the things in this poem that are odd and oddly grouped together. On the one hand, there are countless options given. There seems to be so many options that the voice is offered, but actually there's very limited choice of what he can actually do. There are, he says, no options given with the guise of countless alternatives. So that this idea that being in a world of options, but actually practically there is no escape. So this adds to the sense of frustration that there isn't anything you can do to escape going round and round in this world of automated options. Another paradoxical idea is in this line, this direct quote, "He transfers me to himself." Transfers me to himself. Now, again, that's something that's really quite impossible to do. You can't transfer someone to yourself. You can't transfer someone from something where they were to the same place. So this sense of paradox and repeated sort of circularity and repetition in the poem gives it its increasing sense of somebody struggling with frustration. Again, things that are important are translated as not being important. Music that's supposed to be beautiful is not beautiful. Individuals, instead of being treated like individuals, are treated as numbers. So all these things have conflicting ideas. I think it's really important to look at how there are no options offered. And for this, I want to look at the very end of the poem. We have these rhymes: hold, old, cold, told. And I think the rhyming technique here is each phrase ends in this rhyme. So if I just read that out for you: please hold, please grow old, please grow cold, please do what you're told, grow old, grow cold, this is the future, please hold. That rhyme internally in those lines and at the end of those lines shows how there's such a lack of options. It's only the consonant sound that is changing at the beginning of these words, and showing the repetition here and the lack of anywhere to go except old, 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 old. That's what we're getting here. And the only end is growing old, growing cold, and the ultimate death is what we're facing. The other things that I think really contribute to the sense of frustration in this poem are the way that the clauses and the sentences are constructed. We have a great many of these and clauses. And I'm talking, and great says the robot, and a great account, and my wife says, and my wife says, and I'm talking on the phone to a robot, and my wife says, and my translator says. So these and clauses, this and conjunction at the beginning of these lines shows how the build-up of repeated clauses kind of batters against this voice. It's all building up and just preventing him from progressing. And something else comes along to hinder him all the time. Also, there are some very short, abrupt sentences. Your future, here, she says, particularly when the wife is talking. And it's as if he's getting a telling off here, I think. So the poor voice on the phone trying to access his account here is being battered from all sides. It's being battered by repetition, these and clauses, these short, abrupt sentences. The whole experience is rough and jerky and unpleasant, and it doesn't work like really professional prose. There's no lyricism to it. There are harsh sounds and harsh repetitions and harsh imperatives. Eine kleine Nachtmusik, please hold. Eine kleine Nachtmusik, please hold. The harshness of these utterances and the repetitiveness just make for a very frustrating experience. So I hope by the end of that you have thought about how to write an essay on frustration in Please Hold, just like Maria.